In Freight Waves, I saw some interesting infographics on the cost of collision, just the statistics for the last couple of years. We all know that roadway fatalities, as a total number, it's been hovering at like 40,000 per year. I've always heard it was like about as many as killed in the entire Vietnam War every year die in traffic collisions. So that number as a rate has been dropping over the last 30 years, but actually it ticked back up according to FreightWaves infographic here. The frequency and the rate of fatalities is actually ticking back up, meaning accidents are getting more severe and causing more deaths per capita. Not a great trend. There's a lot of factors involved, right? I think generally, just again, I was saying this to you before the show. I always want to complain about how bad people are at driving. They are so bad. They go through like a week's long course, they go through a couple things. They get their driver's license, and they never once get any kind of training. And yet, it's like the truckers are always blamed for any kind of collision if there's a truck versus a passenger vehicle. And just people are just so bad. I don't know what the solution would be, but I just wanted to complain about it. I've said right. Before, and I'm looking. My whole career,
yeah, go ahead.
My whole career has been, focused on driver training and best practices. I can't, like I said before, I can't even offer an opinion to someone on their driving habits without them getting angry at me. Yet we have to deal with all these deaths per year because nobody's getting trained in driving.
Right. And I'd want to see, so I'm looking at this thing too. So first it says traffic crashes cost America $340 billion in 2019. And that's 340 billion, like B with a B, like billion. So it's like obviously this is costing America a lot of money, costing America a lot of money, all these accidents. And obviously, like Matt mentioned, it seems like the statistic was going down, and it seems like there's an uptick for some reason. But with these deaths, I'd want to see a distribution of like what age ranges. So it's like what age, obviously probably more than likely the younger you are, and obviously that's why insurance is expensive, so expensive for young people. Like all that stuff makes sense. But I would really want to see some numbers behind what deaths are caused at what, like, where out of this 36,000 or so deaths, like what age are you most likely to die in a car accident? I'm sure, like I said, is probably skewed towards the younger, but really that would help paint some clarity on like exactly how this is unfolding, and whether you should how you could what that would how would that change your behaviors? I don't know, but it would be interesting just to see those numbers.
I think that there's like three interesting, because I dug into not specifically this data source, but some others not too long ago. And there were three things that stood out to me about this crash data at a national level. First is we see decreased fatalities over the last 30 years. And I think that that's primarily driven, and the research says it's primarily driven by safety improvements. If you think 30 years ago, like a car having, like you might have had one airbag, right? Things were square and boxy and steel. And now cars are designed to like roll around you when you crash, right? So like ultimately our technology has improved a lot in our automobiles. The second thing that jumped out at me was just increased traffic volume. If that's kind of the headwind here, like infrastructure in this country has not evolved as fast as traffic counts have increased. And so you've got higher density, higher speed on the roadway. And then I think the third one that I found I didn't actually think about that I thought was really interesting is you see the uptick in 20 and 21. And there's a lot of people that are experts that think that that's COVID related, because what happened during COVID, everybody moved out of cities, right? Everybody, like, why did housing boom so strong? Because people were in confined, like urban cities like Chicago and LA and New York, and they moved out either into the suburbs or into suburbs in other cities, thus creating more of a commute. right? And so the actual vehicle miles increased pretty significantly,
Right.
which I thought was an interesting side effect.
Yeah, which I don't understand at all because like I was on the road for part
That's
of that
it.
time, and it doesn't
That's
make any sense because like the roads were just totally empty in 2020, and and so maybe the really a good chunk of that spike is in 21 when things were starting to open up and the commutes became much longer. So, but yeah, it's pretty nuts. Like these it just goes to show you these numbers are ginormous. $340 billion. That's absolutely insane. Matt, I think you wanted to add something.
Yeah, I thought Flint touched on something too. So that reduction in the fatality rate was mostly driven by things that happen after the collision, right? Improvements in the vehicle's physics and everything that reduce that impact to the human and protect the life. So maybe we're kind of getting at the bottom of that, the potential for those safety improvements from what happens after the collision. So how do we prevent the collision from happening in the first place is where we'd have to go to continue to see a reduction in that rate.
Right, and I was, I'm a fan of Tesla vehicles and whatnot, and I pay attention to their like self-driving tech and how it scores much better on accidents. Obviously, there's a ton of stuff out there, and there's tons of accidents all the time out there too. But like seeing how they pay attention to those metrics as well is also just a very, very interesting insight.